Chosen one. There may have been moments in your life when you walked into a room and something quietly shifted. The atmosphere changed in a way that was difficult to explain. Conversations slowed down or suddenly became quieter. A few people glanced in your direction and then looked away. Others kept their distance, as if they were unsure how to approach you. Nothing dramatic happened on the surface, yet the energy of the room seemed to rearrange itself the moment you arrived. At first, experiences like this can feel confusing. You may have wondered whether you had done something wrong without realizing it. Perhaps you questioned whether your presence was unintentionally intimidating to others. When situations like this repeat themselves over time, it is natural to begin searching for an explanation. You might have asked yourself why certain people react to you with caution, distance, or even quiet discomfort, despite the fact that you are simply being yourself. Many chosen ones go through a period where they interpret these reactions as rejection. It can feel as though you are somehow different in a way that others cannot fully accept. Yet the deeper truth often has very little to do with rejection and much more to do with awareness. When a person has gone through deep reflection, spiritual growth, and emotional refinement, something about their presence begins to change. It is not always something visible, but it is something people can feel. Self-awareness carries a certain quiet intensity. It creates a kind of clarity that many people are not used to encountering. In a world where most individuals move through life reacting automatically to habits, expectations, and social pressure, someone who moves with calm intention can stand out without even trying. You may not be saying anything unusual. You may simply be observing, listening, and responding thoughtfully. Yet even that alone can alter the energy around you. People often feel uncomfortable when they cannot easily categorize or control what they are encountering. When someone meets a person who does not follow the usual patterns of conversation, behavior, or emotional reaction, it can create uncertainty, and uncertainty often leads to caution. It is not always that people dislike you or fear you personally. Sometimes they are simply responding to the unfamiliar sense of independence and awareness that your presence carries. For many chosen ones, this shift begins after seasons of challenge, healing, and inner transformation. Difficult experiences often force a person to examine themselves more deeply. Over time, that process produces maturity, discernment, and emotional stability. These qualities quietly change the way you carry yourself, the way you listen to others, and the way you respond to the world around you. Because of that transformation, people may sense that you are not easily influenced by the usual pressures. They may notice that you do not rush to react emotionally or to follow every social expectation placed in front of you. Instead, you move with a steady sense of awareness, and, for some individuals, encountering that kind of presence can feel unsettling because it reminds them of questions they have not yet asked themselves. In this video, we are going to explore the deeper reasons why some people feel uneasy, cautious, or even fearful around chosen ones. These reactions are not always what they appear to be on the surface. Often they reveal something about the dynamics of awareness, authenticity, and personal transformation. Understanding these patterns can help you stop questioning your own nature and instead recognize the role your growth plays in shaping the energy around you. If this message resonates with you, take a moment to like and share this video so other chosen ones can hear it as well. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more messages designed to strengthen you on your journey. One of the first reasons people sometimes feel uneasy around chosen ones is because of the clarity they carry. This clarity is not something that appears suddenly or without cost. In many cases, it is the result of difficult seasons that forced you to see life more honestly than most people ever do. Betrayal, disappointment, and emotional hardship have a way of sharpening perception. When someone has experienced enough of these moments, they begin to look beyond appearances and pay attention to the deeper patterns behind human behavior. At first, this kind of awareness often develops quietly. You may not even realize that your perspective is changing. You simply begin to notice small details that once passed by without much thought. The tone of someone's voice when they say something kind. The pause before a person answers a question. The difference between what someone promises and what they consistently deliver. These subtle observations gradually build a more complete picture of the intentions behind people's actions. Over time, chosen ones often learn to recognize patterns that others ignore. They begin to sense when a compliment is sincere and when it carries hidden resentment. They notice when someone offers help but expects control in return. They observe the difference between genuine concern and carefully disguised criticism. None of these realizations usually happen overnight. They develop slowly as experience teaches the mind to connect small signals that reveal a deeper truth. Because of this clarity, chosen ones often sense when a person's words do not fully match their behavior. Someone may speak about loyalty, yet their actions repeatedly show inconsistency. Another person may claim to support you while quietly undermining your progress behind the scenes. These contradictions do not always reveal themselves immediately to others, but a person who has learned to observe carefully will often notice them sooner. This ability to recognize inconsistency can make some people uncomfortable. Many individuals rely on social masks to navigate relationships. They may present themselves as supportive, honest, or trustworthy, even when their motives are mixed or uncertain. In everyday interactions, these masks usually remain unchallenged because most people do not look beyond the surface of a conversation. However, when someone with strong clarity enters the environment, those masks become harder to maintain. Even without saying anything directly, your presence alone can create a sense that the usual performance is no longer working as easily as before. People who rely heavily on manipulation or hidden agendas often depend on others overlooking subtle inconsistencies. When they encounter someone who notices those inconsistencies, it disrupts the dynamic they are used to controlling. It is important to understand that this clarity does not mean chosen ones are constantly judging others or looking for flaws. In fact, many chosen individuals simply prefer honesty and transparency. They are not interested in exposing people publicly or creating conflict. They often remain quiet observers, allowing others to reveal their true character through repeated actions over time. Yet even quiet observation can create tension. When a person who is accustomed to manipulating situations senses that their behavior is being understood more clearly than expected, they may begin to feel uneasy. They may not be able to explain exactly why they feel that way. On the surface, everything may appear normal, but beneath that surface, they recognize that their usual strategies are unlikely to succeed. Sometimes this discomfort appears in subtle ways. A person who once spoke freely around you may suddenly become cautious with their words. Someone who enjoyed exaggerating stories may become defensive when questioned about details. Another individual might attempt to distance themselves from you without offering a clear explanation. These reactions are not always conscious decisions. Often they are instinctive responses to the feeling of being seen more clearly than they expected. For those who depend on deception or emotional manipulation, transparency can feel threatening. When someone's influence relies on confusion or hidden motives, clarity disrupts their advantage. The presence of a person who values truth and awareness creates an environment where those tactics lose their effectiveness. As a result, the manipulative individual may begin to perceive you as a problem rather than as a neutral presence. Interestingly, chosen ones often do not even need to confront anyone directly for this shift to occur. Your calm attention and quiet discernment may be enough to change the dynamic. People sense when they are interacting with someone who is not easily fooled. They sense when exaggeration, emotional pressure, or false narratives will not produce the same results. Because of that awareness, your presence can naturally encourage honesty in certain environments. When people realize that their intentions are likely to be recognized, some will choose to behave more authentically. Others, however, may react in the opposite way. Instead of adjusting their behavior, they may label you as intimidating, distant, or difficult to understand. This reaction can be confusing if you have no intention of creating tension. Many chosen ones genuinely prefer peaceful relationships and mutual respect. They do not seek to challenge others unnecessarily. But clarity has a way of revealing truth whether it is spoken aloud or not. And when truth becomes visible, it can make some people uncomfortable. It is also important to recognize that this ability to see patterns is not about perfection. Chosen ones are still human and capable of making mistakes in judgment. However, the difference lies in the willingness to pay attention and learn from experience. Instead of ignoring warning signs, they gradually develop the habit of observing behavior over time before placing full trust in someone's words. This habit of careful observation can protect chosen ones from repeating painful situations. It allows them to recognize early signals that a relationship may not be healthy or that someone's intentions may not be entirely sincere. While others might dismiss these signals as minor concerns, chosen individuals often understand that small patterns tend to reveal larger truths over time. As a result, the clarity you carry becomes both a form of wisdom and a form of protection. It helps you navigate relationships with greater awareness. It allows you to remain calm when others attempt to create confusion, and it helps you maintain a sense of balance, even when the motivations of those around you are not immediately clear. For people who value honesty, this clarity can actually be comforting. Genuine individuals often appreciate someone who listens carefully and understands the deeper meaning behind actions. They feel respected by the presence of someone who values authenticity rather than appearances. But for those who rely on masks, manipulation, or hidden agendas, your clarity becomes something they instinctively fear, not because you are trying to expose them, but because the environment you create makes deception difficult to sustain. In that sense, the uneasiness some people feel around chosen ones is often a reflection of their own internal tension, rather than anything you are intentionally doing. Understanding this dynamic can help you stop questioning your own nature. Your awareness is not a flaw that needs to be softened or hidden. It is the result of lessons learned through experience, reflection, and growth. And while it may cause discomfort for those who prefer confusion, it also creates a space where truth has the opportunity to exist more freely. Once you begin to understand the clarity discussed in the previous section, another dynamic naturally becomes visible. When you see people and situations more clearly, certain patterns that once influenced you no longer have the same effect. What once created confusion, pressure, or guilt gradually loses its ability to control your decisions. This shift leads directly into the second reason many people feel uneasy around chosen ones. It is not only that you can recognize hidden motives, but also that you can no longer be easily manipulated by them. For many people, influence in relationships often operates through emotional leverage rather than open communication. Some individuals learn early in life that they can shape outcomes by applying subtle pressure to the people around them. This pressure can appear in many forms. Sometimes it is expressed through guilt, where someone makes you feel responsible for their emotions or problems. Other times it appears as emotional drama designed to pull you into a reaction. In other situations, manipulation is more subtle, disguised as advice, concern, or even affection. These tactics often work because most people naturally desire harmony and acceptance. Human beings are social by nature, and many individuals grow accustomed to adjusting their behavior in order to avoid conflict or disapproval. When someone suggests that you are being selfish, insensitive, or ungrateful, the instinctive reaction is often to defend yourself or change your behavior in order to restore peace. But chosen ones frequently go through experiences that force them to question these dynamics. After encountering situations where their kindness was taken advantage of, or their intentions were misunderstood, they begin to examine the patterns behind these interactions. Over time, they learn that not every emotional appeal is genuine, and not every criticism is rooted in truth. As this awareness grows, their dependence on external validation begins to fade. Instead of constantly seeking approval from others, chosen ones gradually learn to rely on their own discernment. They begin to measure their decisions against their values rather than against the expectations of those around them. This shift changes the entire structure of how influence works in their relationships. When a person no longer bases their identity on pleasing others, manipulation loses much of its power. At first, this transformation can feel uncomfortable, even for the chosen one themselves. Standing firm in your own judgment sometimes means facing disapproval or misunderstanding from people who were once accustomed to influencing your choices. Yet as time passes, the confidence that comes from self-awareness becomes stronger than the desire for constant acceptance. When people encounter someone who cannot be easily manipulated, they often react with confusion. The strategies that once worked suddenly stop producing the expected results. A comment meant to create guilt may be met with calm silence instead of apology. Emotional pressure may fail to provoke the reaction it once did. Attempts to control decisions through fear or criticism may simply be acknowledged and then set aside. For individuals who rely heavily on these methods, the experience can be deeply unsettling. Many people are not consciously aware that they are using manipulation as a way to maintain influence. They simply follow habits that have worked for them in the past. When those habits suddenly lose their effectiveness, they are left without the familiar tools they once used to guide interactions. In social environments where influence plays a significant role, this shift can alter the balance of power. A person who once assumed they could shape your decisions may suddenly realize that their words no longer carry the same weight. This realization can trigger a sense of lost control, and for someone who has grown accustomed to controlling outcomes, losing that control can feel threatening. Rather than adapting to a healthier form of communication, some individuals respond by creating distance. They may describe your independence as stubbornness or arrogance. They may suggest that you have become difficult to talk to, or that you no longer care about the opinions of others. In reality, what they are often reacting to is the disappearance of their ability to influence you through indirect pressure. It is important to recognize that independence does not mean rejection of all guidance or advice. Chosen ones are still capable of listening, learning, and considering the perspectives of others. The difference lies in the fact that their decisions are no longer driven by fear of disapproval. They evaluate information thoughtfully and choose their path with intention, rather than reacting automatically to emotional pressure. This quality can be deeply empowering, but it can also challenge the expectations of people who are used to controlling the narrative around them. In environments where manipulation has been normalized, someone who refuses to participate in those patterns can appear disruptive. Your calm refusal to respond to guilt or pressure exposes the underlying dynamics that others may prefer to keep hidden. There is also a psychological dimension to this shift. When manipulation no longer works, the person attempting to influence you is forced to confront their own behavior. They may begin to realize that their methods depend on emotional control rather than honest communication. This realization can create discomfort, and instead of reflecting on it, some individuals redirect that discomfort toward you. They may say that you have changed too much. They may claim that you are distant or unapproachable. Yet these descriptions often reveal more about the change in your boundaries than about your character. What they are actually experiencing is the absence of the leverage they once relied upon. For chosen ones, learning to stand independently is rarely an easy process. It often follows years of navigating relationships where expectations were unclear or where emotional pressure shaped important decisions. Through reflection and growth, they eventually recognize the importance of protecting their autonomy. They learn that kindness does not require surrendering control over their own life. This realization gradually reshapes the way they interact with the world. Instead of reacting impulsively to every emotional appeal, they pause and evaluate the situation with greater clarity. They ask themselves whether the request being made is fair, whether it aligns with their values, and whether responding to it would support or undermine their well-being. Over time, this calm discernment becomes a defining characteristic. People who interact with you begin to sense that your decisions cannot be easily redirected through pressure or persuasion. They realize that influence must come through honesty and mutual respect, rather than emotional manipulation. For individuals who are comfortable with authentic communication, this shift often leads to healthier relationships. Conversations become more direct, expectations become clearer, and mutual understanding grows. But for those who rely on indirect control, your independence becomes a barrier they do not know how to cross. This is why some people interpret the independence of chosen ones as intimidating. What they are really encountering is a person who has learned to think and choose for themselves. Your presence reminds them that control based on pressure is fragile and temporary. When someone stands calmly in their own awareness, that form of control simply has nowhere to attach itself. Understanding this dynamic can help you view these reactions with greater perspective. When someone feels uneasy because they cannot manipulate your choices, it does not mean you have become cold or distant. It simply means that you have grown beyond patterns that once limited your freedom. And while that growth may challenge certain relationships, it also creates space for connections built on honesty, respect, and genuine understanding. As the previous section explained, once people realize that emotional pressure and manipulation no longer work on you, the dynamic of interaction begins to change. The usual methods that once controlled conversations or influenced your decisions suddenly lose their effect. When this happens, another quality of the chosen one often becomes more noticeable, and that is the power of silence. Your ability to remain calm, observant, and unhurried in your responses creates a form of psychological pressure that many people are not prepared to handle. Chosen ones frequently develop the habit of observing more than speaking. This tendency usually grows out of experience. After encountering situations where reacting too quickly created misunderstandings or conflict, many chosen individuals learn the value of patience. They begin to listen more carefully, watch more closely, and take time to understand what is truly happening before offering a response. What begins as a protective habit eventually becomes a natural part of their presence. Instead of responding immediately to every comment or emotional trigger, they pause. They listen to the full conversation. They pay attention to the tone of voice, the timing of statements, and the patterns in someone's behavior. While others may rush to defend themselves or prove a point, chosen ones often remain composed and reflective. This calm silence can feel unusual to people who expect immediate reactions. In most social situations, people rely on predictable emotional responses to maintain a sense of control. When someone says something provocative, they often anticipate that the other person will respond with anger or frustration. If someone offers criticism, they expect a quick defense or argument. These predictable reactions create a familiar rhythm that allows individuals to guide the direction of the interaction. But when a chosen one responds differently, that rhythm disappears. Instead of reacting instantly, you remain quiet. You take in the situation without displaying strong emotion. You allow the moment to settle before deciding whether a response is even necessary. In that silence, the usual script no longer functions as expected. This unexpected pause can create tension for the person who initiated the interaction. Without the reaction they anticipated, they begin to feel uncertain about how the situation will unfold. The emotional control they hope to establish through provocation or criticism suddenly disappears. Instead of directing the conversation, they find themselves waiting, unsure of what you might say or do next. Silence has a way of shifting attention back onto the person who created the situation in the first place. When someone delivers a provocative comment and receives immediate resistance, the focus quickly moves to the argument that follows. But when the comment is met with calm silence, the attention lingers on the original statement. The person who spoke begins to reconsider what they said and how it may have been perceived. For many individuals, this experience is uncomfortable because it forces them to confront their own words without distraction. The absence of immediate reaction removes the opportunity to escalate the conversation into emotional conflict. Instead, they are left with the weight of their own statement and the uncertainty of how it is being interpreted. In these moments, people often begin to question what you are thinking. They may wonder whether you notice something deeper in their words. They may start to imagine that you understand more than you have expressed. Even if you have not spoken a single word, your silence creates the impression that you are carefully evaluating the situation. This uncertainty can generate psychological pressure. Humans naturally prefer situations where they can predict the outcome of their actions. When that predictability disappears, the mind begins searching for explanations. The person may start to replay their own words internally, questioning whether they revealed more than intended. For someone who is used to controlling conversations through emotional reactions, this shift can feel particularly unsettling. Instead of steering the interaction through conflict or persuasion, they are now faced with a calm presence that does not respond according to the expected pattern. The result is a quiet tension that they cannot easily resolve. It is important to understand that chosen ones rarely create this pressure intentionally. Their silence is usually not a strategy designed to intimidate others. Rather, it reflects a preference for thoughtful response over impulsive reaction. By allowing time for reflection, they avoid being pulled into unnecessary conflict or emotional drama. However, even when silence is natural and unintentional, its effect on others can still be powerful. Many people are not accustomed to being observed carefully, without immediate feedback. They feel more comfortable when interactions follow familiar patterns, where emotions are expressed quickly and openly. Silence disrupts that pattern and introduces an element of uncertainty. Over time, individuals who interact with chosen ones begin to sense that their words carry greater weight in these conversations. They realize that exaggeration, manipulation, or careless remarks will not easily dissolve into emotional argument. Instead, those words remain visible in the quiet space created by your attention. This awareness often leads people to adjust their behavior. Some may become more careful in what they say, recognizing that their words are being considered thoughtfully rather than dismissed quickly. Others may grow uncomfortable with the level of attention and choose to distance themselves from the interaction entirely. In either case, the psychological pressure produced by silence reveals something important about the dynamics of communication. When a person refuses to engage in reactive conflict, the responsibility for maintaining honesty and clarity shifts back onto everyone involved. The conversation becomes less about emotional dominance and more about genuine understanding. For chosen ones, this approach often reflects a deeper commitment to inner balance. Silence allows them to remain grounded in their values, rather than being pulled into situations that drain their energy. By observing first and responding later, they create space for wisdom rather than impulsive reaction. This quality may confuse or unsettle those who are accustomed to louder, more reactive environments. Yet it also creates opportunities for more meaningful dialogue. When the noise of immediate reaction fades away, the true intentions behind words and actions become easier to recognize. In this way, the silence of the chosen one becomes more than just the absence of speech. It becomes a form of presence that encourages reflection, both within yourself and within those around you. And while some people may interpret that quiet strength as intimidating, its true purpose is far simpler. It is the expression of a mind that has learned to observe carefully, respond thoughtfully, and remain steady even in moments where others expect chaos. When we look at the previous section, it becomes clear that the silence of the chosen one already creates a certain psychological tension. People begin to feel observed, not in a threatening way, but in a way that makes them more aware of their own words and behavior. That quiet presence slows the interaction down and removes the emotional noise many people rely on to avoid deeper reflection. Once that noise disappears, something else often begins to surface. This leads us into another reason people sometimes feel uneasy around chosen ones. Your presence does more than interrupt manipulation or provoke thought. It can also act as a mirror that reflects the inner conflicts people carry within themselves. Chosen ones often serve as mirrors without even realizing it. This does not mean they are intentionally confronting others or trying to reveal hidden truths. In most cases, they are simply living according to their values and maintaining a level of self-awareness that they have developed through experience. But when someone lives with that kind of internal clarity, it naturally highlights the differences between authenticity and avoidance in the people around them. Human beings often carry contradictions within themselves. A person may claim to value honesty while quietly hiding certain truths. Another may speak about responsibility while avoiding difficult obligations. Many individuals build identities around ideals they hope to embody, yet their actions do not always align with those ideals. In everyday life, these contradictions can remain unnoticed because social environments rarely challenge them directly. However, when someone with strong self-awareness enters that environment, the contrast becomes more visible. You may not say anything critical or confrontational. You may simply continue acting according to your principles. Yet that alone can bring attention to the difference between words and actions in those around you. For example, a person who struggles with honesty may feel uneasy around someone who values integrity deeply. Even if you never question them directly, your consistent honesty can make their own behavior feel exposed. They may begin to sense that their inconsistencies are more visible than they expected. The discomfort they experience does not necessarily come from anything you have said. Instead, it comes from the internal tension created by the contrast between your behavior and their own choices. The same dynamic can occur with responsibility. Someone who avoids accountability may feel uncomfortable around a person who approaches life with discipline and commitment. Your willingness to face challenges directly may remind them of responsibilities they have been postponing or avoiding. Once again, the discomfort does not originate from criticism. It arises from the quiet reflection your presence creates. This mirroring effect is powerful because it operates without confrontation. Instead of forcing people to examine themselves through argument or accusation, it invites that reflection naturally. When someone observes a person living with clarity, they begin to compare that example with their own behavior. Sometimes this comparison inspires growth. At other times, it produces resistance. For individuals who are ready to grow, encountering someone who reflects integrity and self-awareness can be motivating. They may feel encouraged to examine their own patterns more honestly. In these cases, your presence becomes a source of inspiration rather than discomfort. The mirror you provide helps them recognize areas where they want to improve, and they respond with curiosity rather than defensiveness. But not everyone is prepared for that level of reflection. For many people, confronting inner conflict can feel overwhelming. It requires acknowledging mistakes, reconsidering long-held beliefs, and accepting responsibility for personal choices. These are not easy tasks, and the mind often prefers to avoid them whenever possible. When avoidance becomes the default response, the easiest solution is to distance oneself from the source of reflection. Instead of examining the internal tension your presence reveals, some individuals choose to interpret that discomfort as a problem with you. They may describe you as intimidating, judgmental, or difficult to understand. Yet these labels often function as a way to redirect attention away from the inner conflict they are experiencing. This reaction is not always conscious. Many people do not fully recognize why they feel uncomfortable around certain individuals. They simply notice the emotional tension and assume it must be caused by something external. Because you happen to be present when that tension appears, they associate the feeling with you, rather than with the deeper issues within themselves. This dynamic can be confusing for chosen ones, especially in the earlier stages of their journey. When several people respond with distance or uneasiness, it can create the impression that something about your personality is causing the problem. You may begin questioning whether you are unintentionally making others feel judged or criticized. Yet in many cases, the opposite is true. The discomfort arises precisely because you are not judging or attacking anyone. Your calm presence removes the distractions people often use to avoid self-reflection. Without emotional conflict to focus on, they become more aware of the internal contradictions they have been carrying quietly. It is also important to understand that mirrors do not create the image they reflect. They simply reveal what is already there. When someone reacts strongly to the reflection your presence provides, it is often because they are encountering parts of themselves they have not fully accepted. The uneasiness they feel is the result of that encounter, rather than the cause of it. For chosen ones, this role as a mirror often develops naturally as their awareness deepens. Through personal growth, they become more aligned with their values and more attentive to the patterns shaping their lives. This alignment creates a sense of authenticity that others can recognize, even if they cannot easily explain it. Authenticity has a unique quality. It cannot be easily imitated, and it often challenges environments built on pretense or superficial interaction. When someone consistently acts in alignment with their beliefs, it disrupts the comfortable illusions that allow contradictions to remain hidden. In some environments, this disruption becomes an opportunity for collective growth. People begin to notice the difference between authenticity and performance, and they adjust their behavior accordingly. But in other environments, the disruption is perceived as a threat to established patterns. When that happens, the response is often resistance rather than reflection. Understanding this dynamic can help chosen ones maintain perspective when they encounter negative reactions. If someone distances themselves because your presence makes them uncomfortable, it does not necessarily mean you have done something wrong. It may simply mean that the mirror you provide is reflecting truths they are not ready to face. This awareness allows you to move forward without carrying unnecessary guilt or confusion. Your role is not to force anyone into self-examination. Personal growth must come from within each individual. What you can do is continue living with honesty, integrity, and awareness, allowing your example to remain consistent regardless of how others respond. Over time, the people who are ready for that reflection will recognize its value. They will see your presence not as a source of discomfort, but as an invitation to become more honest with themselves. And in those moments, the mirror you provide becomes something far more powerful than criticism. It becomes a quiet catalyst for transformation. When we reflect on the previous section, we begin to see how the presence of a chosen one can unintentionally reveal the internal struggles of others. Your authenticity acts like a mirror, quietly reflecting contradictions people may not be ready to face. But this mirroring effect is only part of the reason some individuals feel uneasy. There is another element that often amplifies that discomfort. It is the fact that chosen ones eventually become comfortable being different, and that quiet independence challenges the expectations that many people rely on to feel secure within their social environment. Most people grow up learning, either directly or indirectly, that fitting in is the safest way to move through life. From early childhood, individuals are taught to follow social norms, to adopt the opinions of the group, and to avoid behaviors that might attract criticism or rejection. This process becomes deeply ingrained. People learn to adjust their personalities depending on the environment they are in, shaping their words and actions in ways that make them more acceptable to those around them. Because of this conditioning, many individuals spend years, sometimes entire lifetimes, trying to meet the expectations placed upon them by family, community, or society. They may suppress parts of their identity, soften their beliefs, or follow paths that do not truly align with their inner values, simply because those paths appear safer or more widely accepted. Approval becomes a form of emotional currency, and losing it can feel like a threat to one's sense of belonging. Chosen ones, however, often go through experiences that slowly dissolve that dependence on social approval. The process rarely begins by choice. In many cases, it starts with seasons of misunderstanding or isolation. There may be moments when others misinterpret your intentions, question your perspective, or distance themselves because they cannot relate to the direction your life is taking. At first, these experiences can feel painful. Being misunderstood can create a deep sense of loneliness. But over time, something important begins to change. Instead of continuing to chase acceptance that never feels fully secure, chosen ones begin to turn inward. They start to examine their own beliefs, values, and priorities more carefully. Through reflection, personal growth, and sometimes spiritual transformation, they gradually develop a stronger sense of identity that is not dependent on the approval of the crowd. This shift is subtle but powerful. It changes the way you evaluate the choices in front of you. Instead of asking whether a decision will make others comfortable, you begin to ask whether it aligns with your truth. Instead of constantly adjusting your personality to fit the expectations of every environment, you begin to carry the same authenticity wherever you go. As this independence grows, chosen ones often become comfortable with the idea that not everyone will understand them. They recognize that different perspectives, experiences, and priorities naturally lead people down different paths. While they still value connection and mutual respect, they no longer feel the need to reshape themselves simply to maintain universal approval. For many people observing from the outside, this attitude can feel unfamiliar or even unsettling. In environments where social harmony depends on everyone following similar patterns of behavior, someone who confidently walks a different path can disrupt the balance that others rely upon. It raises questions that many people would rather avoid. When someone sees a person who is not constantly seeking validation, it can challenge their own assumptions about how life should be lived. They may begin to wonder whether the expectations they have been following truly reflect their own desires, or whether they have simply been conforming to avoid conflict. This realization can be uncomfortable, especially if it reveals choices they have been postponing or avoiding. Your willingness to be different becomes a quiet reminder that alternative paths exist. Without saying anything directly, your example demonstrates that it is possible to step outside the boundaries of expectation and still maintain a sense of stability and purpose. For individuals who have spent years adapting themselves to meet external standards, this possibility can feel both inspiring and intimidating. Some people respond to that realization with curiosity. They may become interested in understanding how you reach this level of independence. They may ask questions about your perspective, or begin exploring their own beliefs more deeply. In these cases, your example becomes a source of encouragement that helps others rediscover parts of themselves they had long suppressed. But not everyone responds in that way. For some individuals, seeing someone comfortably embrace their differences can trigger a sense of insecurity. If a person has built their identity around following social expectations, encountering someone who does not follow those rules can create uncertainty. It may cause them to question whether the path they chose was truly their own, or simply the one that felt safest at the time. Rather than confronting those questions, some people choose a simpler response. They label the chosen one as strange, rebellious, or difficult to understand. These labels create distance, allowing them to maintain their existing worldview without examining the deeper implications of your independence. Yet for the chosen one, the decision to walk a different path is rarely about rebellion. It is about authenticity. It reflects the understanding that life becomes more meaningful when actions are guided by personal truth, rather than by fear of rejection. This realization does not remove the challenges of being different, but it transforms the way those challenges are perceived. Instead of seeing difference as a problem to hide, chosen ones begin to see it as a natural expression of individuality. They recognize that every person carries a unique combination of experiences, insights, and perspectives. Attempting to erase those differences for the sake of conformity would only diminish the richness of human interaction. Over time, this perspective creates a quiet confidence. Chosen ones no longer feel the need to prove their worth through constant approval. They understand that the right connections will form naturally with people who respect authenticity and share similar values. At the same time, they accept that not every environment will resonate with their path, and that is perfectly acceptable. For observers who are still navigating the tension between authenticity and approval, this confidence can appear intimidating. They may interpret your calm independence as detachment or superiority, even though it simply reflects a deeper comfort with your own identity. In reality, the freedom they perceive is not the result of arrogance but of experience. Chosen ones have often spent years questioning themselves, learning from mistakes, and gradually releasing the fear of standing apart from the crowd. That journey teaches them that belonging does not require abandoning their truth. Instead, it requires finding environments where authenticity is welcomed rather than suppressed. In that sense, your willingness to be different serves as a quiet invitation to others. It shows that living honestly does not require universal acceptance. It simply requires the courage to remain aligned with who you truly are. And while that courage may unsettle those who depend on conformity, it also opens the door for deeper connections with those who are ready to embrace their own uniqueness. As the previous section explained, chosen ones gradually become comfortable with being different. They stop shaping their identity around the expectations of others and begin walking a path that reflects their true values. Once that independence develops, another transformation naturally follows. When you no longer depend on constant approval, you also begin to recognize the importance of protecting your time, your energy, and your emotional well-being. This realization leads directly to the next trait that often makes chosen ones appear intimidating to others: the strength of their boundaries. Boundaries are not something most people are taught to develop consciously. In many environments, kindness is often confused with constant availability. People are encouraged to say yes, even when they feel exhausted, to remain silent when something feels wrong, or to tolerate situations that quietly drain their energy. Over time, this pattern creates relationships where expectations become one-sided. One person gives endlessly, while others grow accustomed to receiving without limitation. Many chosen ones have lived through periods where their generosity and patience were repeatedly tested. They may have trusted people who later betrayed that trust. They may have offered help and support only to discover that their willingness was being used rather than appreciated. Experiences like these can be painful, but they also carry an important lesson. Eventually, the chosen one begins to realize that kindness without boundaries often invites exploitation. This realization rarely happens overnight. It usually develops slowly after several moments of reflection. At first, you may notice a lingering sense of exhaustion after certain interactions. You may begin to recognize that some conversations leave you feeling drained rather than uplifted. Gradually, you start to identify patterns in the environments and relationships that create those feelings. Once those patterns become clear, chosen ones begin to change the way they approach their time and energy. They start to understand that protecting their well-being is not selfish. Instead, it is necessary for maintaining emotional stability and clarity of mind. Without that protection, it becomes difficult to continue growing or helping others in meaningful ways. As a result, chosen ones begin to set stronger boundaries. They become more selective about the commitments they accept. They think carefully before agreeing to requests that may conflict with their priorities or values. They learn that saying no is sometimes the most responsible decision they can make. For individuals who are used to unlimited access to someone's time and attention, this change can feel surprising. In the past, they may have relied on your willingness to listen, assist, or accommodate their needs. When those patterns shift, they suddenly encounter limits they were not expecting. The dynamic they once relied upon begins to change. Sometimes this reaction appears in subtle ways. A person who once called frequently may become frustrated when you are no longer available at every moment. Someone who previously expected you to solve their problems may become irritated when you encourage them to take responsibility for their own choices. In these situations, the discomfort they feel is often less about your boundaries themselves and more about the loss of the convenience they once enjoyed. Instead of recognizing the importance of your limits, some individuals interpret boundaries as rejection. They may assume that your refusal to engage in certain situations means you have become distant or uncaring. Words such as cold, selfish, or unapproachable may appear in their descriptions of you. Yet these interpretations often misunderstand the true purpose of boundaries. Boundaries are not barriers designed to isolate you from the world. They are guidelines that define how you allow others to interact with your time, energy, and emotions. Healthy boundaries protect the space necessary for personal growth and balanced relationships. Without them, interactions can easily become overwhelming or unbalanced. For chosen ones, boundaries become particularly important because their sensitivity and awareness often attract a wide range of people. Some individuals are drawn to the calm presence and listening ability that chosen ones naturally possess. While many of these connections are sincere, others may unconsciously attempt to rely too heavily on that presence. Without clear limits, the chosen one can become a constant source of emotional support for others while neglecting their own needs. Over time, this imbalance can lead to exhaustion and frustration. Recognizing this risk, many chosen individuals learn to create clear distinctions between compassion and responsibility. They remain willing to listen and offer guidance, but they no longer carry the burden of solving every problem around them. They understand that true growth requires each person to take responsibility for their own journey. By stepping back from situations where their involvement would only prolong dependency, they encourage others to develop their own strength. This approach may initially confuse people who are accustomed to a different dynamic. Someone who once expected immediate support may struggle to understand why you now encourage them to face their challenges directly. Yet in many cases, this shift ultimately leads to healthier relationships because it replaces dependency with mutual respect. Strong boundaries also help chosen ones maintain clarity in environments that may not align with their values. When a situation becomes manipulative, dishonest, or emotionally draining, they feel more comfortable stepping away. Instead of remaining in harmful environments out of obligation, they trust their judgment and protect their inner peace. For observers who are not familiar with this level of self-protection, such decisions can appear abrupt or confusing. They may wonder why you are willing to leave circumstances that others would tolerate for the sake of convenience or social harmony. Yet from the perspective of the chosen one, remaining in environments that compromise their well-being no longer feels acceptable. It is important to remember that boundaries are not expressions of hostility, they are expressions of self-respect. They reflect the understanding that your time and energy are valuable resources that must be used wisely. By protecting those resources, chosen ones preserve the strength needed to continue their personal and spiritual development. Interestingly, strong boundaries often attract the right kinds of relationships over time. People who value honesty and mutual respect tend to appreciate clear expectations. They understand that limits are not obstacles, but signals of integrity. In these connections, boundaries create stability rather than conflict. Those who react negatively to boundaries often reveal their own expectations through that reaction. If someone becomes upset simply because you are protecting your time or declining an unhealthy situation, it may indicate that the previous dynamic was not balanced to begin with. Recognizing this can help chosen ones release unnecessary guilt about setting limits. Ultimately, the strength of your boundaries reflects the lessons you have learned through experience. Each moment where your kindness was taken for granted contributed to a deeper understanding of how to protect yourself without losing compassion. Instead of closing your heart to the world, you simply learned how to open it more wisely. For those who are unfamiliar with this balance, your boundaries may appear intimidating. They see someone who is calm enough to say no, confident enough to walk away, and secure enough to protect their peace without apology. But what they are truly witnessing is not distance or coldness. It is the quiet strength of someone who has learned that respect for others begins with respect for oneself. As we approach the final part of this message, it becomes clear that many of the reactions people have toward chosen ones are connected to something deeper than personality or behavior. In the previous sections, we explored how clarity exposes hidden motives, how independence weakens manipulation, how silence creates psychological pressure, how authenticity reflects inner conflicts, how comfort with being different challenges social expectations, and how strong boundaries change the dynamics of relationships. All of these qualities share one common origin. They are the visible signs of a transformation that has taken place quietly within you. And this leads us to one final reason people sometimes feel uneasy around chosen ones. Many people fear what they cannot fully understand. When someone undergoes a deep internal transformation, the change is rarely obvious from the outside. The process itself happens slowly and often in solitude. It takes place in moments of reflection, in periods of hardship, and in the quiet decisions a person makes about how they want to live moving forward. For the chosen one, transformation is rarely comfortable. It often begins during seasons of confusion or difficulty, when life forces you to question what you once believed. Situations that once seemed clear may suddenly reveal hidden layers. Relationships may shift, expectations may collapse. During these moments, the chosen one is pushed inward, searching for answers that cannot be found in the usual places. This inner search requires patience and honesty. It means confronting fears that were once ignored and acknowledging wounds that were never fully healed. It means examining the patterns that shaped your past decisions and deciding which of those patterns still belong in your future. None of this work is visible to the outside world. It happens quietly, often during moments when no one else is watching. During this process, chosen ones gradually develop a deeper awareness of themselves and their environment. They begin to understand their emotions more clearly. They learn to respond to situations with greater calm rather than reacting impulsively. They discover that many conflicts in life are fueled by misunderstanding, insecurity, or unhealed pain. Through reflection and experience, their perspective begins to shift. Situations that once felt overwhelming become easier to navigate. Words that once triggered anger or frustration lose their power. The chosen one becomes less reactive, more patient, and more thoughtful in how they engage with the world. However, while this transformation unfolds internally, people on the outside rarely see the journey that created it. They only see the final result. They see someone who remains calm in situations that would once have caused conflict. They see someone who no longer reacts emotionally to criticism or negativity. They see someone who carries themselves with a quiet confidence that seems difficult to explain. Because the process behind this transformation is invisible, the outcome can appear mysterious to others. They may notice the change, but struggle to understand how it happened. When someone becomes calmer, more focused, and less influenced by external pressure, it can create the impression that something about them has become unfamiliar. For people who have not gone through a similar process of reflection and growth, this unfamiliarity can feel unsettling. Human beings naturally seek explanations for the behaviors they observe around them. When those explanations are not immediately available, the mind may interpret the difference as something intimidating or unusual. Someone might look at your calmness and wonder why their attempts to provoke a reaction no longer work. They might notice your patience and question why their criticism does not disturb you the way it once did. They might observe your focus and wonder how you remain steady, while others around you become distracted by conflict. Without understanding the journey behind that stability, they may interpret your strength as something distant or difficult to approach. In reality, what they are seeing is not distance or superiority. It is simply the result of the growth you have gone through over time. Transformation changes the way a person interacts with the world. It replaces impulsive reactions with thoughtful responses. It replaces insecurity with quiet confidence. It replaces confusion with clarity. But because these changes occur gradually and privately, they often appear sudden to those who were not present during the process. For the chosen one, this transformation is not about becoming better than others. It is about becoming more aligned with truth and self-awareness. It is about learning to live with integrity, even when that path is not the easiest one. It is about healing the parts of yourself that once reacted from fear or pain. When others encounter someone who has gone through this kind of inner growth, they may feel both curiosity and uncertainty. Some will be drawn toward the calm stability they sense in you. They may want to understand how you reached that point and what lessons helped shape your perspective. Others may react with hesitation. If they have not yet begun their own journey of reflection, your transformation can remind them of questions they have not asked themselves. The contrast between your calmness and their own unresolved struggles may create discomfort they do not know how to explain. But it is important to remember that this reaction is not a sign that your transformation is a problem. On the contrary, it is evidence that the work you have done within yourself has created a visible difference. Growth always produces change, and change naturally disrupts expectations. Over time, the people who are ready for that difference will recognize its value. They will see the patience, clarity, and balance that come from genuine inner development. They will understand that your calm presence is not meant to intimidate anyone, but to reflect the lessons you have learned through experience. For those who are not yet ready to understand, the mystery of your transformation may remain confusing. They may continue to interpret your quiet strength as something unusual or intimidating. Yet even in those situations, the truth remains the same. What they are witnessing is not something supernatural or unreachable. It is simply the visible result of inner growth, reflection, and healing. It is the outcome of someone who chose to face difficult questions, learn from painful experiences, and gradually become more aware of who they truly are. And while that transformation may seem difficult for others to understand, it is also the reason you now carry the clarity, independence, and strength that define the journey of the chosen one. When you step back and look at everything we have explored in this message, a clear pattern begins to emerge. The reactions people sometimes have toward chosen ones are rarely about hostility or personal dislike. More often, they are responses to something unfamiliar. What many people sense in your presence is not something threatening, but something they cannot easily control or explain. What they are reacting to is the freedom and clarity you carry. Your independence challenges patterns that many people have relied on for years. In environments where emotional pressure, social expectations, or manipulation once shaped interactions, someone who moves with calm awareness naturally changes the atmosphere. When you are no longer driven by the need for approval, the usual methods of influence stop working the way they once did. When you observe quietly instead of reacting emotionally, conversations shift in unexpected ways. When you set healthy boundaries, relationships that depended on imbalance begin to reveal their true nature. All of these changes come from the same source. They are the result of growth. Through reflection, experience, and sometimes painful lessons, you have gradually developed a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you. That understanding allows you to move with greater stability, even in situations where others may feel uncertain or reactive. But growth often creates contrast. When someone encounters a person who carries clarity, independence, and emotional balance, it can highlight the areas where they themselves still feel unsure. That contrast can feel uncomfortable, especially for individuals who are not yet ready to question the patterns guiding their own lives. This is why it is important to remember that being a chosen one does not mean your purpose is to make others uncomfortable. The goal of personal growth is not to separate yourself from the world or to stand above others. True growth is quiet and grounded. It is expressed through patience, humility, and a steady commitment to truth. However, growth also reveals things. When someone lives with honesty and self-awareness, it naturally exposes illusions that once remained hidden. It reveals manipulation where there once appeared to be harmony. It reveals insecurity where there once seemed to be confidence. And sometimes, it reveals possibilities that others have been afraid to consider. For some people, encountering that level of authenticity becomes an invitation to grow. They begin to ask deeper questions about their own lives. They become curious about the strength and peace they sense in your presence. Over time, they may begin their own journey toward greater awareness. For others, the same encounter can feel unsettling. Instead of seeing your growth as inspiration, they may interpret it as distance or intimidation. They may assume that your calmness means you are judging them, or that your independence means you are rejecting them. Yet these interpretations usually reflect their own internal struggles rather than your intentions. Because of this, one of the most important lessons for chosen ones is learning not to shrink themselves in order to make everyone comfortable. Trying to hide your growth or soften your truth will not solve the deeper tension others may feel. Authenticity cannot exist if it is constantly adjusted to meet the expectations of every environment. Instead, the path forward is much simpler. Continue to walk your journey with humility and strength. Remain open to connection, but do not abandon the clarity you have worked so hard to develop. Allow your actions to reflect patience, respect, and integrity. In time, the people who resonate with those qualities will naturally find their way into your life. Those individuals will not see your independence as something intimidating. They will recognize it as a sign of inner stability. They will appreciate the honesty and balance you bring into conversations and relationships. Most importantly, they will understand that your strength does not separate you from others, but rather reflects the work you have done to become more aligned with who you truly are. Your presence may challenge certain patterns, but it also creates space for truth and authenticity to exist. And in a world where many people struggle to find clarity, that presence can quietly become a source of encouragement and guidance. If this message spoke to you today, take a moment to like and share this video so other chosen ones can hear it as well. And be sure to subscribe to the channel for more messages that will continue to guide and strengthen you on your journey.